So today, government class, our topic that's going to last a couple days here is the powers of the president. All right. So what power does the president actually have? And we're going to break it down into several sections. Um, Today, we're just going to specifically talk about his power of being in charge of the cabinet. All right. Now let me kind of define that. Um, the cabinet is made up of 15 separate departments, uh, like, say, Department of Defense, Department of Transportation, Department of Energy. And all of these departments are under the authority of the president. And the beauty of giving the president this power, and the reason he's so powerful, is that the executive branch, remember, their job is to put the laws into practice, right? To execute them, to make them happen. And so when, for instance, there is a new speed limit passed, well, then it's the Department of Transportation that goes and it enacts that. When there's a new regulation to make sure that nuclear power plants are safe, well, it's the Department of Energy that then enforces that and sends people to investigate each nuclear power plant and make sure that they're following the regulations. Okay, and the point here is twofold. The president gets power because he gets to appoint the leaders of each department. Now, the Senate does have to approve these leaders, but by and large, the president pretty much gets to appoint who he wants. So he gets a lot of power there. He's appointing somebody that he likes, and he also may remove that person whenever he desires. Again, for the most part, right? There's a few exceptions, but he gets to control who's in charge of that department. Second way that this gives him a lot of power is that he has an incredible amount of influence on how strictly and how tightly each department will enforce the rules and regulations that they're in charge of. So for instance, all right, taxation, right? I mean, he can direct I'm going blank. The Department of the Treasury. Sorry, he can direct the Department of the Treasury to to really strictly enforce our taxation laws and really audit millions of Americans and make sure that they're really paying their taxes honestly. Or he can kind of say, hey, you know what, that doesn't seem like a real great use of resources. Let's not do that as much. All right, and so all these regulations that are used to put the laws into practice, the president can kind of tighten down on them, or he can loosen up on them. And it's not that he can ignore them. Remember that they're laws, right? Congress passed these laws, but he can kind of decide how much focus each of these laws is going to receive. And that, of course, naturally gives him a lot of power. So your task today, then, is to choose just one of the 15 cabinet departments. Choose one that interests you, okay? Maybe you work on a farm. Well, choose the Department of Agriculture. Maybe you want to be a teacher, okay? Research the Department of Education. So do something that interests you. I've given on the assignment page, I've given just a very, very short, like 3 or 4 word description of each of the 15 departments, so you kind of have an idea of which one to choose. And in the assignment, I've given you 2 links that will both be pretty useful. They will not have all of your information, but they'll have quite a bit of it. So I would suggest starting there and then doing maybe some independent research. Also be aware that in the assignment, not every answer is going to be able to be Googled, right, or researched. Some of it you'll have to just rely on your experience as an American and your other research that you've done. You'll have to kind of think about it and come to a conclusion, okay? Now, the only other question on the assignment that I'll touch on, I believe it is number 4. It asks, what problem was the nation experiencing that caused your department to be created? Or what was the historical context? Okay, so let me just give you an example, right? So one that's at least pretty close to your lifetime. So the Department of Homeland Security, that was just created in the year 2001. And I'm sorry, in the year 2002. Sorry, math was wrong there. So yeah, it was just created in 2002. And it was created in response to, I'll leave that up to you to do a little more research, but it was created in response to basically 9/11. All right, and you'll have to detail that out if you choose the Department of Homeland Security. But there was a specific problem and specific event that led us to create this whole huge department of our government. And that's the case all the way back to the very, very first departments, like the Department of State, Department of Treasury, Department of Justice. Okay, there were specific functions that we felt needed an entire government organization to deal with. Okay, so just heads up on that question, right? You'll have to maybe do some very specific research and think about what's going on in history at the same time this department was created, because there was probably an issue that led to us creating that department. Okay, again, just to wrap it up as an overview, the cabinet is just one way that the president gets to use his executive power and be a very powerful leader, because he gets to appoint the leaders of the cabinet departments, and he gets to tell them how strictly to follow the rules and regulations that they should be enforcing. And so this gives the president lots of indirect control and power over the functions of many, many parts of our government.